Brenna Davis, Christina Devoir, Alicia Buckholz, Maddie Scott, and Melissa Fisher. In 206, we have Commissioner Bureau and Strohmeyer, Allison Franz, Brian West, Chris Osbury, Annie Cathy, Carrie Powers, Ann Hughes, Ashley Boyers, and Ryan Pather. Thank you.
Is there any public comment? Not.
Sorry, we have
Agenda.
TV Fairbanks on also.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Public comment? Okay, consent agenda. 1, 2, 3, 4. Anything needs to be pulled out or discussed separately?
Since we have,
Ryan.
yes, we have expertise in the room here. Anything about the drug task force?
Good morning, everybody. We're
Come
here,
Come on up to the table.
Okay.
Maybe it'll be easier.
looking for your approval for the MOU between the Five Valleys Drug Task Force, the Missoula County Sheriff's Office, and all the other law enforcement agencies here locally. This MOU is a grant that we received. It's a JAG grant issued by the Montana Board of Crime Control, and it's funding that we can use to help combat and curb the drug issues that we have in our community. And that money is divvied up into several agencies that we can help offset use towards overtime and whatnot to work on the drug crisis that we have.
Yeah, changes this next year over prior cycles?
Actually, we are increasing our request for this coming year to allow for an additional drug detective. We're looking to move a sergeant detective position out to the drug task force from the sheriff's office. Yeah, this year we are going to be requesting roughly $224,000, just over, which will cover our current drug detective and then hopefully an additional position, as well as, like he mentioned, overtime for the member agencies.
So is that 200,000+ for just Missoula County or so we see granite and mineral on here. How does that work?
We would essentially act as a pass-through agency for those agencies with their drug-related overtime. So that doesn't all stay with us.
You're the ones applying.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just for overtime?
Well, those two positions plus the overtime.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks for the good work. I would move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second, any further discussion or public comment? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Right, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wow, what a light agenda. That is it. Legislative update, unless there's correspondence. Okay, legislative update.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Commissioner Slotnick is not here. He asked that we talk about House Bill 841 and 842, which is the constitutional amendment and a legislative referendum on sales tax. The constitutional amendment would basically, and the legislative referendum, bless you, would authorize the He had asked to talk about those. We don't typically take positions as the county on constitutional initiatives or legislative referendums because they go out to be voted on by the public. And so there's not necessarily a position for the county to take. Plus the funding in this case would be tied entirely to education, which again is not the county's general lane, but it's certainly something if the commission wanted to that we could weigh in on. Like I said, unfortunately, Josh was the one who wanted to talk about these today. He sent me a message last night and then he's on a plane, so I don't think he's dialed in.
Did he have a specific question or was he just?
He did not. He asked if we were taking a position on those, and I said we don't typically because they're things that go directly to the voters. They're not necessarily actually legislative.
So this would just refer to the voters?
Correct.
A
constitutional amendment.
Okay.
And then the legislative referendum would set the parameters around what that funding would be used for, which in this case would be to offset property taxes for education.
Wait, and explain how that would happen. I'm sorry.
So a legislative referendum is a little bit different than a constitutional initiative, and maybe Brian can better explain this, although he's got that same look that I have whenever we talk about the difference between these two things. But a legislative referendum is basically a vote of the people to in essence, add something into the Montana Code annotated versus actually amending the state's constitution. So those two things are different. In that fact, in the legislative referendum in this case basically would set that parameter where the funding can only be used for the purpose of education, and would require then, because it was by legislative referendum, if I remember correctly, a 2/3 vote of the legislature to actually change that section of law, as opposed to just a simple majority.
Why could they not do it just by a simple majority if we're talking about amending code?
Because of the fact that they placed it before the voters, I think, under a legislative referendum.
Because they don't want to step out on a limb and just take action themselves.
Theoretically, they could also just pass it, right? That's not the mechanism they chose. They chose the question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they chose the path of referring it to the voters.
Okay, got it.
At this point, those are both just in committee. They're not like out onto the floor session. Like I said, we don't historically take positions on constitutional amendments just because, again, it's a request to go to the voter. But we certainly could if the county wanted to.
I'm
Sales tax.
fine with our position right now.
Okay.
I'm sure Josh would have found that enlightening.
SB 237 is the only other bill I wanted to touch base on, and that bill we are supporting. That bill basically would require the legislative interim committee, when they get the report from Department of Revenue on what property tax rates could be set at to make the increases in values neutral, would require that actual revenue committee to then adopt those so that they would go to the session theoretically to be voted on. And so we are supporting that process, kind of formalizing that process, because right now it's basically a letter that goes to the interim committee, and then at least for the last several legislative sessions, they've chosen to take no action. This would actually require the interim committee to actually act.
The act being making a recommendation.
The act being, yeah, in essence, creating policy that would say to them, they have to put forward a recommendation.
So what would have happened 2 years ago when
The legislature would still have to vote to actually change the rate, so there's no guarantee they would, but it would kind of, in essence, force that issue a little bit to the fact where the legislature would actually have to take it up, as opposed to it just being a letter that goes to.
That sounds like a lot of the legislature didn't even really know about.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to
Okay.
know whether
Okay,
they do or not.
yes, support.
So that's where we are with that. We have transmittal deadline for revenue bills coming up next week, next Friday. So crunch is on for money bills now to move between the two houses. I have nothing very exciting, sorry,
Okay, thank you.
for today anyway.
Anyone have any questions or comments?
HB 841 and 842.
This might be a record. 7 minutes. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.